Views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of this station, its owners, staff, or management. The following program is sponsored by Rob Warner at Guild Mortgage, NMLS number 825102. Welcome to the Happy Hour with Rob Warner, an hour of stimulating conversation adding value to your financial future. Rob brings helpful insights into many aspects of the mortgage and real estate industry. Now, here's your host, Rob Warner.
Happy Monday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Happy Monday. I'm pleased to have a guest on today named Bonnie Kelly. She's founder of Bonnie Kelly and Associates, and we're breaking from the normal genre of business because, well, this is intertwined with business. But anyway, we'll let Bonnie answer some questions here, and you'll find out more about her as we go. So anyway, hi, Bonnie. How are you today?
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's really great having you here. I mean, this is just, I've been looking forward to this show today.
Yeah, same here.
So can you tell me just a little bit about yourself and what you do? Or not me, tell our audience, please.
Absolutely. So I actually, at the easiest form, am often referred to as an emotional intelligence coach. So if you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, what does that mean? It is the ability to identify what you feel and why you feel it and how your feelings are showing up in your business, in your finances, in your relationships, and can be perpetuating a cycle of self-sabotage. So my job is to help you identify those areas of where you are stuck and are participating in your self-sabotage and help you untangle, unwind, and reprogram your mind.
Very good. So what made you get into this field? Can I ask?
Yeah, I know it's such a unique field. I mean, I often, when I'm on a plane and people ask me what I do, they're always just like, I've never heard of anybody doing that. And that's often the follow-up question is, why am I doing this? Or how do I get into this? And honestly, I've been now an entrepreneur for 13 years, but I originally started this personal development journey to figure out how to be healthy myself. See, like many people, I have a story, and a story of adversity and hardship where I was a homeless teen. I was addicted to drugs. I was in and out of jail, in and out of rehab. I knew what it meant to feel worthless, to feel unloved, to feel that you don't matter, to feel you have no purpose. And I truly believed that I wasn't enough. And so as a result, I had all of these beliefs that were now driving my decisions, driving where I went to school and who I dated and the jobs that I had. And so for me, when I finally woke up one day and realized that I was participating in my prolonged suffering. Now, I didn't ask for a lot of the hurt and the hardship that I experienced. I didn't ask for the sexual trauma or the physical trauma that I experienced in my adolescence. But once I realized that as an adult, that I was perpetuating that story, and that story kept me trapped in this life of suffering, then I knew I had to rise to the challenge and do something different. So I got started on this journey at first for selfish reasons, for myself. I needed to know how to change my own life, which then ultimately I learned that once I got to the state of normal, once I got to this place where I thought, okay, I could be a normal functioning member of society, I realized that normal actually isn't that great, because normal is where you're still sweeping things under the rug. You're not dealing with your stuff. You're not dealing with your emotions, that you still live with these insecurities and this fear and this doubt. And so I went on a mission to be extraordinary. And once I got to that place where I was emotionally and mentally extraordinary, now I'm in this place where I can effectively help other people be there too. So that's the journey.
Good for you. You just made a key point, though, that not a lot of people can identify what they need to do, right?
Yeah.
They just stay in that rut. They can't identify that.
They stay in okay.
Or they stay in okay.
Yes.
They stay in normal.
Yes.
Hey, before we get going with too many other questions, you have a book, right?
I do.
Can you talk about that book real quick?
Of course.
All right.
So the book that I wrote is called True to Your Core. It's unlocking the subconscious beliefs that are wreaking havoc in your life. So True to Your Core is helping you identify the unconscious beliefs that are actually the driving force behind a lot of your self-sabotaging behaviors. So if you're a perpetual procrastinator, Okay? If you are an avoider, if you sabotage in your finances where you spend and you don't save, there's actually a belief that is lurking in the subconscious or the unconscious that was installed in your mind, most likely on accident in your childhood, that is fueling that behavior as an adult. So the book actually helps you actually get to grow up in my life. So I use all of these experiences and teach you what's happening to the mind. So how this traumatic experience shaped these beliefs, and then how these beliefs are still showing up and playing a role in your adult life. And then I give you a workbook to help you work through it.
Very good. Where can folks get that book at?
Oh, my favorite spot is always Amazon. So Amazon.com, and you just call True to Your Core. If you Google that and Google Bonnie Kelly, it'll show up
Very
real
cool.
quick.
True to Your Core. I got to write that down.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about something? I read some things about you, and can you talk about de-weeding your mental garden? You talk about pulling these weeds up from the roots, okay?
Yes.
Can you share what that means?
Yeah, I love this analogy. When people often ask me, okay, Bonnie, simplify what it is that you do and how that I can apply it to myself, this is the best analogy to do so, is that when we start to think about your mind as like a garden, that if you have been unattended or unattending your garden for decades, right? Because most of us haven't really done a mental, emotional evaluation in decades, in years. Well, what happens is that we've ignored our garden of the mind. And if you ignored your garden in the backyard, I mean, seriously, Rob, if you ignored it, what would all of a sudden take over and dominate?
Weeds.
Tons of weeds. And those weeds are going to be what are going to suffocate all the happy, the constructive, the joyful thoughts, feelings, and emotions or habits, that are moving your life forward. And then these weeds begin to dominate. And then we forget to recognize that those are false and can be changed, but they feel more powerful. So then we live our life with these beliefs or these thoughts that I'm not enough, I'm not capable, I don't deserve, that I don't matter, I can't do it, I'm stupid. Whatever that belief is, those are the weeds in the mind. So when we talk about de-weeding the mind, what we're encouraging people to do is to start taking that mental and emotional evaluation of where you're at. If you just begin right now to evaluate yourself, to evaluate where are my thoughts going? Am I in a state of numbness? Am I in where I'm shut down, I feel nothing? Well, believe it or not, that's still a reaction or a result. That's actually a way of coping, is that it's avoiding what you're truly thinking and feeling. It's just a mask. And so when we begin to start doing that evaluation, we begin to notice all the weeds in the mind. And just like any good gardener, if we went into a garden and we took a weed whacker to the weeds, it would give you a temporary satisfaction. You'd be like, oh, look how pretty it is. But are we fixing it, Rob?
No, they're going to grow right back.
Right, and they're going to actually grow back bigger and stronger because the roots now can spread further. And so when we talk about de-weeding the mind, is that we have to not only identify these limiting thoughts and belief patterns, but we have to see where how deep those roots go. Like, where else have they infected our mind? And we have to get into our minds and do the work, just like getting into a garden on your hands and knees and digging them out at the root.
Wow. Yeah, I think I need some de-weeding, actually. I
Who
do.
doesn't?
I know. It's like I need a tune-up.
I think everybody does. And that's where I was talking earlier about challenging the status quo, right? Challenging the norm. Because people, we're living in a very numb or unemotional society. And this is where there is a huge cry out for people to say, no, wait a minute, I'm still unhappy. I'm doing all the right things, and I'm still unhappy. And it's because we're not looking at the truth. We're not looking at where the real block is. And we have to begin to start doing the work to alleviate the pain in our life.
The work. There you go. There's the key. The
That's
work.
it.
It's nothing's for. I mean, you have to put work into it.
Yeah, just like anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you anything great that's ever been accomplished required some form of rigorous work.
Okay. Talk to me about how does self-sabotage limit our ability to thrive in different areas of our lives?
How
okay?
doesn't it?
Self-sabotage. Can you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I know this one's actually, what's interesting, it's harder for people to sometimes relate. They're like, well, I'm not in a cycle of self-sabotage, because we often think, self-sabotaging as like something really big or detrimental, right? But I want you to think, if you're listening to this, where you subtly self-sabotage as well as the mega self-sabotage. So you could be self-sabotaging in your fitness, right? If you, are great for going to the gym for a month and then you don't go for 3 months, and then you go for a month and then you don't go for 3 months. Or your diet, where you are eating really well, and then you see that donut, and then that's it. A whole week you're just eating like crap because you're like, I screwed up anyways. That's self-sabotage.
Oh, you know what? We're going short on a break. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Hang in there. Sorry, I didn't catch it. Welcome back to the Happy Hour, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rob Warner, and we have our guest, Bonnie Kelly, on the show today. Bonnie, we were talking about self-sabotage, and
Yes.
Can you go back into that? I'm sorry we had to cut you off.
Hey, that's totally okay. So what I was mentioning is that self-sabotage is showing up in so many areas of your life, whether we were talking about maybe in the smaller ways is showing up in your fitness, right? Where we go to the gym for a month and then we don't go for a few months, or in our diets where we can eat the right foods and then we eat that one donut and poop, it's all over. We're downhill for a week and then we get re-inspired to get back in. That's just some examples. Same thing in your finances, or even in your relationships, you can self-sabotage. When we begin to start paying attention, begin to start asking ourselves or connecting the dots of where self-sabotage is showing up in your life. Maybe you aren't saving very well, or maybe, and you just find yourself spending frivolously. Well, that's a form of self-sabotage. But self-sabotage is just the result. It's the reaction. It is the outward expression of an inward issue. And so when we can begin to start doing the work and tracing it back into the root that goes back to the garden of the mind, what are the roots that are causing this cycle of self-sabotage? Now, these lurk in the unconscious or the subconscious aspects of the brain. And when we can begin to connect the dots where those are at, we can begin to start untangling and pulling them at the source versus just focusing on the external result or the external problem. Because once we can focus inward to transform on the inside, the outward will change.
Well said. Well said. So, talk about, okay, we're mixing some items up here a little, but I think they're all interconnected.
They
okay?
always are.
So, going back to de-weeding our mental garden, what kinds of emotions need detoxing from our systems?
The best answer for that is to ask yourself what limits you, what stops you, what blocks you. And when we think about, because there's certain emotions that we think are serving us. Let me give an example. That a lot of times people think that fear is a motivator, right? And it is, right? I will be very motivated to run if a lion is chasing me. My fear of being eaten is going to cause me to run faster than anyone else that is in this building. But so that fear is a motivator, but at what cost? So that's where we have to say, where is it limiting you? How is it limiting you? And begin to start asking ourselves how we can begin to change that. Now, the same is true with anger, right? We can find that anger is a motivator, but anger is also at what cost? Because when we begin to start asking ourselves, how do I feel after I've had that rush of adrenaline, after I've had that rush of cortisol, it probably isn't spectacular. It's not great. And so we have to begin to step back and start to ask ourselves where and how are these emotions impacting our decisions, and begin to de-weed the ones that don't serve our highest good.
Wow, it sounds like a task.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, I mean, there's no sugarcoating the fact that to be the best version of yourself, meaning to be an unhindered, awesome person, like you're the best expression of who you are, it requires work. And that's why I say it challenges the status quo. And this is where one of the big things that I'm championing right now is to spark an emotional revolution, is to say no more are we going to be okay with what's normal, that we have to rise up and begin to start taking emotional responsibility for where our thoughts and feelings are, and get serious about how they're impacting our businesses, how they're impacting our relationships, how they're impacting our disconnection. and begin to make change around that.
Oh, I need you bad. So, okay, how do these weeds affect our lives at home, at work, in our relationships? I mean, if we don't attend to them.
Well, and again, that connects back with that self-sabotage. But let's look at relationships for a second. I know we're talking to business owners, to entrepreneurs, a lot of people that are just out there connecting to people. If you knew that you were the biggest block that is blocking you from that next sale, that next partnership, that next deal, you would do something about it. But we tend not to think about it in those realms, right? We will often put the blame outside of us. We'll put the excuses, or we'll allow our excuses to drive our decisions. But in reality, like our belief system, whatever it is that we believe to be true about ourselves, is underneath the surface, is what is driving our disconnection from each other. And so when we walk into a room, for example, let's say you walk into a networking room and there's 50 people in there, and somebody gives you a weird look, or you get that weird vibe, and you find yourself shrinking. That really isn't an outward issue. It's not, and we tend to that group's not welcoming, or they're not, they're not connecting, or they're not friendly, when actually there was a part of us that got that subconscious or unconscious program got triggered, and we shriveled. And it isn't until we begin to take that ownership and recognize, okay, why am I shrinking, and connect it to, well, maybe I'm feeling inadequate. Maybe I'm feeling I'm not smart enough. Maybe I perceive that these people know more than I do, or I'm intimidated to ask for the sale, or I feel afraid that they're going to reject me. It isn't until we acknowledge those dynamics and those facts that we can begin to change how we show up in a room. So that's just one example when we're talking in relationships of how these weeds, right, this belief that maybe I'm not capable or smart enough, or people don't like me, which if you really trace it back, Rob, goes all the way back to our childhood. We can connect the dots to an experience that we felt with in high school, or an experience that we felt because of our parents. And it's that begins to, that is still lurking in the back of the mind, that is driving these modern day decisions.
Oh my gosh, I know. I think about this because I've been having this conversation with my wife lately, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to go back to my childhood and think about things that happened in my childhood, but possibly there's things lurking in
everybody, and that's just actually, if we think about how the brain operates, just how the brain works, like it is just a giant storage unit, right? I mean, it observes, and of course it has more functions to that. So if any brain geeks out there, trust me, I totally understand. But the brain is going to remember and process information, and its job is to cut down on that processing ability. So we use our past experiences to comprehend and understand what we're experiencing in the modern day. So I'm going to get a little brain geeky for a moment with you, Rob. Is that okay?
Brain geeky. Yeah, let's do it. Brain geeky. Okay, I like it.
So we have these childhood experiences, right, that kind of shape and mold our belief system. Now that is now lurking in the unconscious mind. So we have all these programs in the unconscious mind that will instruct us how to operate and behave in life. Well, some of those are how you fold your clothes, how you do the dishes, how you get dressed. Those are all programs, right? You've had to learn those skills and abilities to be able to accomplish them. Well, the same is true when it comes to how we perceive ourselves in the world. Those were conditioned programs that happened in our childhood. Well, unless we've had outside influence to teach us that those things are still in the brain, they are still infecting, or they're infecting how we are perceiving the modern day reality. So here's the statistic on that. Every second, your mind is getting bombarded with about 400 billion bits of information per second. Now, if you just start putting your fingers up and counting 1, 2, 3, count the seconds of me talking. 400 billion bits of information. That means that sight, sound, texture, movement, all of these different stimulations, the brain's taking all of that in at once and is trying to comprehend. However, it's been found that the brain is only able to comprehend 2,000 of that 400 billion bits per second. Now, here's the crazy part. Your brain hand selects which 2,000 of that 400 billion to be able to perceive. Tell me you're not creating your own reality.
Yeah. Oh gosh, these
So
numbers.
if you've had an experience in your childhood, like I'll give an example of mine. In the 8th grade, I got kicked out of band. Like, who gets kicked out of band, right? Like, I feel like they're begging for people to join band.
I think so, yeah. What happened there?
Well, I was constantly in last chair. So for any band geeks out there, every week you compete to see who's the best, for me, clarinet player during that time of my life. Well, if you aren't the best, you get rated in the chair. Well, every week after week for months, I was always in last chair. Well, in a moment of frustration, my teacher came in one day, and he just let off on me. He said, "You know what? You're never going to get it. I don't know why you continue to try. It'd be better for all of us if you just went down to the office and quit now."
Wow, I can't believe a teacher told you that.
Yeah, I get that response a lot. I think that, he was under pressure. This was probably, they were cutting expenses. They had to perform. He basically probably had a bad day and took it out on me, is what happened. So I don't want to shame him, right? And I don't want to make him bad. I recognize now. Well, in that moment, though, at 13 years old, I was in 8th grade, it embedded this seed in my mind that I wasn't good enough. Now, it's just planted this idea. Now, I'm about to enter into high school, Rob. How many opportunities do you think that I will have to validate a perception that I'm not enough?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
We'll have so many because you got to remember this is that time in your life where everyone's awkward. There's all these cliques and there's controversy and there's drama and there's just like all this crap. It's high school, right? And so we have all of these experiences that are now going to start validating this idea that got planted in my mind on accident that I'm not enough. Well, once the brain has enough evidence, it's going to lock that in the mind as proof. Now, that's where true to your core, it becomes unquestionable now. That becomes my identity. And then when that doesn't get left unchallenged, now as an adult, that belief that still lurks in the back of the mind is going to get triggered or activated in the real time with that 2,000 number I was saying. Mm-hmm. When the brain perceives, oh, I know this experience, I know what's happening here, it means you're not enough. Turn away, shy away. Yeah.
Oh, this is great. I feel like I'm getting some good. I think I'm
PhD in mind degree.
Yeah, no, I can see it. I can think back because I was in band. I did all these kind of things too.
Right.
And I never thought how it may affect you later down the line. But
it shapes your perception. And I should say it distorts your perception more than it shapes it. And that's where a lot of us aren't aware that when we're beginning to see these new experiences, right? We're having these new experiences. We get in new relationships, but we find that it's the same over and over again. Well, that's a big part. Isn't that it's the same thing happening over and over again, is that your brain is hand-selecting the 2,000 pieces of this new experience that fits its already pre-existing belief, and that's what's perpetuating the story.
Oh, my gosh. Bonnie, we have 1 minute before we're done the halftime break. Give out your contact information, how folks can get a hold of you.
Sure.
Okay?
The best way to find me is actually BonnieKelly.me. M-E. See, BonnieKelly.me is the best website to be able to find us. You can connect for all of our social media links. You can actually find a link to the book, all of our programs, products, phone number, all of it's there.
Very good. And the phone number, too?
Yeah, it's 916-468-4JOY, J-O-Y.
For the number 4.
The number 4
Joy.
And then J-O-Y. Yeah, so
Very
4568.
good. All right, stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back with Bonnie in a couple minutes. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage. We're welcoming Bonnie Kelly back. Bonnie's with us for the whole show today because it's just too much to cover, Bonnie, in like 22 minutes, okay?
Yeah,
so
okay.
We need the full show with you. We were talking about weeds, and I realized I need a lot of de-weeding in my garden, okay? But I do, because this stuff that, I'm aware of it, and I don't know, maybe I don't self-evaluate enough.
Well, I think it's a typical lack of tools. I think a lot of people are aware that they're participating in their own blocks or their own hindrances, but where do you go with that? Like, what do you do? How do you, what are the steps or action? What's the blueprint? And I think that's where people really get hung up on it. And the other part, too, is that you're not limited all the time. So we have this ebb and flow, this kind of like roller coaster of good and bad and good and bad. And we tend to become the most self-reflective and the most motivated to change in the bad. If we can begin to progressively across our timeline of our life, just focus it on how could I be a better version of me, and just ask ourselves that question, how can I be a better version of me today? And even in that good times, that's when we can change that mentality. We can begin to change how we begin to perceive or even think about our personal development. And then it's going to be consistent. So the bad times aren't so bad because we're investing in ourselves both in the good and the bad times.
All right. I know what I'm doing when we're done with the show. Talk about thought. What is this that I've read on your website?
Thought, feeling, action.
Tornado of destruction. The thought tornado of destruction. I like some of these words you use.
I always laugh at myself because I come up with just the greatest analogies about growing an organic mind, that thought tornadoes of destruction, and these are just fun ways for us to explain what's going on in our lives. So the thought tornado of destruction is actually a tool, to be honest, Rob. So I mean, if you're walking out of here today and you just focus on this one piece, and you really focus on implementing what I'm about to share with you, then that is going to be a tool in the good and the bad that can help you effectively be more emotionally intelligent, more emotionally resilient, and not get hung up or tripped up by those self-sabotaging belief systems. So the thought tornado of destruction is to recognize that every reaction, action or inaction, okay, because we have to acknowledge the procrastinators.
Okay, say that again. Reaction. Say that
Actions,
again.
reactions, and inactions.
Okay.
So an action that we take that is maybe out of alignment with our core values. An inaction, of course, is procrastinating, avoiding, and not doing anything. And a reaction is where we're reacting out of alignment, right? This is where in an argument, maybe you are emotionally reactive. You're yelling, you're short, you're agitated with your team or your spouse. Okay, that reactiveness, that's the reaction. So those are all, when we start to recognize that those are results. Now, I've said this earlier on the show, is that those are an outward expression of an inward issue. So the thought tornado of destruction, I often say that once you hit the action, your tornado has touched down. That's where the most devastation can happen. That now all of your inner world has caused an outward expression that's going to wreak havoc on your town. So if we can begin to trace back and start looking for the early warning signs and start implementing kind of like the early warning signs of the tornado, and we begin to start monitoring what am I feeling that is causing me to behave this way, but then step it back further. What am I thinking to cause me to feel this way? So when we can start to track and trace where are my thoughts, feelings that are driving my behavior, now we have some inward data to be able to change the inner workings, the inward reflection, so the outward result will change. So you want an example?
No, I'd love an example. Yes, please.
So I work a lot of times with actually real estate agents, and one of the things is like call reluctance, right? So that could be the result. That's the inaction avoidance. So that's the result. Well, if we trace it back and say, okay, what were you feeling? What are you feeling that is causing you to be in avoidance? Well, I'm feeling kind of inadequate, or I'm feeling that I'm only bothering them, or I'm feeling that I'm just they don't want to hear from me. Well, those are also thoughts. So when we can start to recognize that feeling is that we're feeling afraid, we're feeling nervous, right? And the thoughts is I think I'm only going to bother them. I think that they're going to only hang up, they're going to reject me. Well, those thoughts that you're having that are not being challenged, that are not being checked, are what are causing that unchecked feeling to drive that behavior. So why, of course, you're going to avoid. Of course, you're going to not want to pick up the phone. You're not going to feel inspired. But if we change the thought and we begin to think thoughts such as I have so much valuable information that the people who answer the phone are going to be so grateful to hear from me. If you think that, you're going to be motivated. You're going to feel encouraged and inspired, and then you're going to behave in alignment with that thinking. So the thought tornado of destruction is recognizing when you've touched down, okay, so when you're in avoidance, in reaction, or inaction, and begin to trace it back for the inner workings. Where are my feelings? Where are my thoughts? And transform that at the source so we can have a different result.
Excellent. That's excellent. That really is. I may not be doing cold calling, but I'm telling you right now in the mortgage business, there's a lot of that
Call reluctance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the reluctance on certain things because,
right.
Very good information.
Yeah.
So tell me, how do we dismantle our negative, like core beliefs, our negative core beliefs?
So now you're getting into the deep, like the good stuff, right? Well, when we think about the thought tornado of destruction, this is all happening in the conscious mind. If you begin to just sit and you can monitor your thoughts, you can monitor your feelings, you can monitor your actions and reactions, right? So the thought, feeling, action is happening in the conscious mind. But there are beliefs, as we mentioned earlier in the show, that are in the unconscious or the subconscious mind that are driving those in the first place. So this is where the repeated patterns. Now, if I challenged you for one full week, if you checked in, let's say 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, where you just checked in, what am I thinking, what am I feeling? Now, if you write down, well, my feeling's numb, apathy, or just I feel nothing, no, you got to look beyond that. What are you avoiding feeling? Okay, because that's really just as a result, it's an action. So when we can begin to really start monitoring that, if you did that for 1 week, a pattern will emerge.
So 3 times a day.
Yep, for 1 week, a pattern will emerge. You're going to all of a sudden notice that you have reoccurring thoughts or similar thoughts that are reoccurring. Well, then when we can ask ourselves, all right, what is this thinking? What does this mean about me? Then we're going to attach it to or connect the dots to a belief. And that belief is an I statement. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I'm not capable. I'm not good enough. I think I said unworthy, or I don't matter, or I'm stupid, whatever that I statement is. And when we connect to that belief, now we can really do some deep-hearted work. So we have to recognize that belief does not exist on its own. Just as I mentioned, that experience of me in high school getting kicked out of band, that experience installed a belief in my mind that I wasn't good enough. Now, that wasn't strong enough on its own to wreak havoc through the rest of my life. That belief needs evidence to gain momentum and power to become my identity. That's the true to your core. So this is where now we can find these beliefs. We have to find all the evidence that keep it in power, all the excuses, the reasons that keep that belief in power.
So you're saying, I'm just interrupting, but you're saying that let's call that band episode.
Yeah.
You're saying that by itself didn't have any power, but if you continue to what?
Unchallenge that belief.
Unchallenge
so the experience, of course, was extremely traumatic for a 13-year-old, right? I mean, I was devastated. He kicked me out in front of the entire band, which was basically the entire school. And at that age, that's like the worst experience in the world. So it was a very painful experience. So it was extremely impressionable. But what I mean by that is that one experience, if it was never revalidated, like if I never experienced another opportunity throughout my life to validate that I wasn't enough, okay, if I never experienced that again, then that would become a distant memory of the past. But if that belief, okay, now actually is distorting how I perceive things and my brain is wondering, am I good enough or not? Now that belief is looking for evidence in the world. And that goes back to that question I said, how many opportunities do you think I had once I entered high school to validate that belief? And so when all of a sudden now I have all these new experiences, my first boyfriend cheated on me, I failed out of what was it, French, I didn't make the choir practice, I didn't make cheer team, like all of these other experiences that now my brain is interpreting as, oh, well, that's because you're not enough. Oh, that's because you're not enough. That belief gained power and momentum and now has locked itself in the brain as truth. And that's what I mean is that core belief. And we have to not only address the belief, but all the evidence around it.
Oh, boy, you had a lot to overcome, huh?
Everybody does, yeah. Now, of course, my story might have more adversity than most, right, with the sexual trauma, the physical trauma, the homelessness, the drug addiction. But I feel like every single person, including yourself, Rob, has a story. And that story of wherever you experience has embedded in our minds these limiting beliefs, or these limiting beliefs that are still wreaking havoc in our adult lives. And they require us to go inwards and say, wait a minute, how am I participating in my suffering? And that's where that challenge of beginning to evaluate your thoughts, feelings, and actions, to identify the belief, to untangle the evidence, to allow you to have freedom in your life.
Okay, I got some homework ahead of me. I'm serious, I do.
Well, the good news, all of this is in the book. Like, I will give you the roadmap in the book of how all of this stuff is interconnected.
What's the book again? Put it out there. We have just a few seconds before the break.
True to Your Core.
True to Your Core.
Yeah, unlocking the subconscious beliefs that wreak havoc in your life.
All right, we're taking a short break. We'll be back with the conclusion of our show. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage, joined again by our great guest, Bonnie Kelly, who I think I'm asking her about 8 hours worth of questions in about a 40-minute show, huh, Bonnie?
Yeah, these are big conversations, but they're necessary ones.
So hopefully we're not confusing our audience too much, but we were talking about the thought tornado of destruction. You were talking about, being in band and other things, too, that are back in our lives.
Yeah.
And so briefly, nothing's briefly on this topic. How do we dismantle? I know you started going into that. How do you dismantle some of those negative core beliefs that you've been stuck with all those years of your life?
Well, and this is where I like to use the analogy, actually, of a good prosecuting attorney, a good defense attorney. So if you can imagine that belief has gained all of this evidence, right? So just be like and it's like decades worth of evidence to validate itself. So if you were a good defense attorney, Rob, what would be your primary job if you walked into a courtroom and there's a stack of evidence that is stacked against you? What would be your number one job?
To prove that's not good, not valid evidence.
Not
I guess,
valid.
Right?
Great.
That it's false evidence or whatever.
So what we have to do is, like, a good defense attorney's job is to come in and we have to go through all of the evidence. So we need to review all of the evidence that is against us. So if you're challenging this belief that I'm not good enough, for example, and that's been with you for years and years and it keeps coming up, and again, like, it's not present every second of every day, but it's a reoccurring belief that shows up on a reoccurring thread throughout your life. Well, a good job, like what your job is to go in and be a good defense attorney. You've been a prosecuting attorney for your whole life. You've been prosecuting yourself. You've been gathering evidence to validate a belief that is hindering and hurting your success. So now what we have to do is we have to become the defense attorney. Well, when you flip sides, now your job isn't to disprove the evidence, but just to create enough reasonable doubt with the evidence so your mind can no longer convict. So we have to go through all the evidence, and we have to begin to poke holes in the evidence so we don't lock down or lock in on that core belief that you're not enough any longer. And that's how we begin to dismantle.
Oh, very well said. I like that you put it in legal terms because I always wanted to be like a lawyer, and I chose lending instead, which is interesting. But putting it in legal terms is a really cool way to do it.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a little time left. Talk about a little bit about like forgiveness and healthy boundaries as a forgiveness tool. Can you go into that?
So if you're a business owner or entrepreneur, it's going to feel like the furthest thing in the world to want to hear about forgiveness. But forgiveness is honestly the gateway into becoming an emotionally intelligent person, meaning that finding a healthy forgiveness practice. Now, hear that word. I said practice. Most of us think that forgiveness is a one-time occurrence, or I've tried it, it didn't work before. But, to truly dive into forgiveness and make it a healthy, ongoing practice is going to create that emotional freedom and is going to allow a doorway into a higher emotionally intelligent version of yourself. Now, I keep throwing that word around, but I want to give you guys some statistics on why you want to invest in becoming more emotionally intelligent. That statistically, it has been found that 58% of all of your job performance relies on a healthy level of emotional intelligence. 90% of the top income performers are estimated to have high levels of emotional intelligence. And on average, people with a high level of emotional intelligence make $29,000 per year more than people who lack this skill. Now, there's another key word. Becoming emotionally intelligent is actually a skill. That means it's just like learning a language, that anyone can learn these skills to be the best version of themselves. And when we can begin to invest in that, you're going to recognize that forgiveness is that gateway between where you've been and where you want to go. I had a client once. She was she came to me and she was just desperate to get her business off the ground. I mean, she had the talent, she had the experience, she had everything, but her business kept failing and failing and failing. After doing some work with her, we recognized that she needed to forgive her way to success. And it was because she was holding on to this experience of where, she was originally a stay-at-home mother. Her husband had built a multi-million-dollar company, and one day came home in the midst of a midlife crisis, said, I blew all the money, spent everything, we're broke, I'm out of here, changed his name to something way random and moved out to the desert. And left her and her 3 kids broke. Okay? So she didn't realize that she had to do forgiveness work around that experience to have success in her professional life. But it was what was required. She really had to begin to recognize the interconnection, that she wasn't allowing herself to have success because she wasn't letting go of her anger. And by the more that she kept herself falling short, kept herself in poverty, the more that she stayed there, the more she felt unconsciously, this was not intentional or she wasn't even aware of it, that he was being punished for what he did, or constantly reminded of what she did. And so it wasn't until we recognized that she needed to forgive and let that go so she could thrive. And now her business is taken off. I mean, she is doing wonderful things in the world. And that was the gift of having that healthy forgiveness practice. Now I get text messages from her, I want to say at least once a month, with just like this huge heart that says thank you so much, because she realized the impact of what that exercise did for her. So we often don't make that connection that lack of forgiveness is affecting our success in our business. But for most people, it is that unwillingness to forgive ourselves, our parents, our past, our partners, whoever, that is really one of those energetic tugs or energetic vampires, right, that's sucking us dry and holding us back, that blocks us from having success.
Well, it's biblically based. I'm a Christian man, and I never heard it used in a business perspective like you're given now. But I'll tell you, in personal stuff, if you're hanging on to something about somebody and you're not forgiving them, it's going to eat you up like a cancer.
It will. And it's going to show up in every area of your life. And I like that you're using like it's a cancer, because that's true. Like most people don't realize that your emotions, okay, how you feel, how you think, are infecting every aspect of your life. It is a virus. And so if you have any unresolved stuff, any unresolved emotions or hurts or pains or past experiences, that is the cancer of the mind, and what is going to keep you from having the success, the money, or whatever it is that you're desiring, that your ambition is trying to help you acquire.
Oh, boy. Okay. How much time do we have left? I'm not really sure. We have 5 minutes. Okay.
Awesome.
5 minutes. So, there's so much to talk about. I'm not really even sure what we can talk about in 5 minutes.
Well, you mentioned boundaries, so I think I want to make sure to address that as well. That boundaries, and again, these are all, like you said, I love that you said that all of these are conversations that are hour-long shows on their own. I mean, we've literally scratched the surface of about 6 massive conversations, 6 massive topics that I hope one of them has sparked or interested any of you listening to do something, to do the work. Well, boundaries is one of those big issues, especially if we're in business or we're running a business or we're even just have a job, is that we fail to know what healthy boundaries are. And this is a really great opportunity for people who are people pleasers, to find ways to begin to enhance or assert boundaries in a loving, compassionate way. Because typically by the time we set or assert a boundary, it's after we've hit our breaking point, right? It's that after people have pushed us too far, and we just unleash on them.
You're looking at a guy that likes to please and do good and help people out, and sometimes I build up like a time bomb.
Exactly, because you'll get pushed and you keep asking and keep asking and keep asking. Well, that right there is where you haven't been flexing your boundary muscles. This is where there's been probably 1,000 times where it would have been essential for you, Rob, to go back and say, no, I'm not feeling like doing that today, or no, I can't help you, or yes, I can, or this person's better, or whatever that assertion needed to be. And there's room for you to be able to start flexing using your voice and flexing those boundary muscles and begin to say no, and to begin to be okay with the discomfort you will feel if you first start saying no after decades of never saying no. And when we begin to balance that out, you're going to find that those boundaries are going to lead to healthier, more enriching relationships where people know how to show up for you. And this is where people are looking at you for leadership. They're not meaning to take advantage of you. It's just that we've misguided them on what's appropriate in our interaction.
Okay, by not having a boundary, you're allowing them to basically...
Yeah.
To take free reign, right, with you.
Yeah.
Maybe that.
Because they don't know they don't know that that's bothering you. They don't know that you've taken it too far, or they've pushed you too far. And that's where it's our responsibility to say, okay, hey, I know this has been okay in the past, but I've changed my mind. It's not okay now. And when we can begin to use that voice in business especially, in leading our teams, you become a more emotionally intelligent, more charismatic, and strong leader that people are going to know how to interact with you, and they're going to constantly feel connected to you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, like I said, that's a whole long conversation on its own.
Okay, we got a couple minutes. I want you to give out your contact info. Talk about the book one more time, just so people know, because I think this book is key, right?
Yeah, especially, and again, if you're not a business owner, or if you are, it doesn't matter. Wherever you're at in your life, personal development, like I said, on that roller coaster, if you're on a high or a low, this is essential. The book is so well crafted. You get the story of growing up in the life of Bonnie Kelly. I use my story intentional to help remove any excuses that you might have to why this won't work. Then we're going to take you into telling you the science behind how these experiences are shaping and molding the neuroplasticity of the mind. And then I'm going to give you work. I'm going to give you the tools and the exercises. And so the best part is that if you are, if you're like, I want this, go on to Amazon, go on to my website, go on to BarnesandNoble.com and purchase the book. And then once you get it, in the very first page, there is a website you can go to, and you can download all of the worksheets for free.
Name of the book again?
True to Your Core.
True to Your Core. Bonnie Kelly, this has been an excellent interview. I had another question for you, but we don't have time. We have like a minute, and we can't get it through. So.
That's all good. That's okay. Thanks so much for having me.
Everybody, I look forward to having you back listening to my show next Monday, so have a great week.
Guild Mortgage Company is an equal housing lender. NMLS 3274. Licensed by the Department of Business Oversight under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Rob Warner. NMLS 825102. All loans subject to underwriter approval. Terms and conditions may apply. Subject to change without notice.